Four-star edge defender Max Granville has all the potential Penn State could ever ask for, but could this end up hurting the class of 2025 recruiting?
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Penn State fans? Thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. My name is Seyko. I am your host of the show. Help me welcome back Dylan Callaghan-Croley, editor for Penn State Rivals, HappyValleyInsider.com. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down. The sports stop sportsing like we want them to, but this summer FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone each and every day all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Max Granville is officially enrolling at Penn State a year early, class of 2025 verbal commit, now a Penn State football player, and will be ready to go joining the team for training camp. We'll talk about the impact on the respective classes for 24 and 25 and what Granville can do as a Penn State Nittany Lion, and then talk about some of the top prospects at the Lasch Bash this weekend. To begin with Max Granville, Dylan, this is a surprising move, right? It could have been anybody really, but to get the caliber of Granville a year earlier, I like his potential. I said that he could be one of the next players in contention to wear the number 11, but he could play defensive end. He could play linebacker. He's just that versatile and he's that talented that he's positionless going into his Penn State tenure.
Yeah, Max's decision to enroll early at Penn State is a big one for the Nittany Lions. I don't think he's going to make a major impact here in 2024. I think it's going to be a big redshirt season for him as he kind of, gets up to the college game, both on and off the field, academically, all that. But, Penn State's going to be losing quite a bit on the defensive line after the 2024 season. And now that Granville's coming in time for practice next week, he's going to have a full year head start to kind of get, up to speed on the college level with Penn State's defense. And that's going to be big for him, I think, heading into the 2025 season. That's going to allow him to potentially have an impact as soon as next year. Could we see him this year? Perhaps. I'm not, going to hold my breath on that, but I think it's really big for the future of Penn State's defense. That Granville is getting this, head start on everybody else. I know, he probably would have came in January if he didn't come in now, but those extra 6 months could really play a huge, factor, especially in the weight room and just in his development as a whole. So again, those extra 6 months I think is going to be big for him. You talk about his position, where he's going to be playing for Penn State. I think ultimately he's probably going to be more of a defensive end, but he does have that ability to, be a stand-up pass rusher. I think we're going to see quite a bit of almost a Chop Robinson game out of him at the Penn State level. Not saying he's going to be a Chop Robinson level player, but a similar game there. And perhaps, depending on how he continues to develop, perhaps something like what Abdul Carter is going to end up doing this fall for the Nittany Lions, in which he's going to, play a little bit of defensive end, going to play a little bit of linebacker. I think Granville is more so definitely a defensive end, but, in high school, he's definitely played some stand-up pass rusher as well, and that is always something that Penn State could use at the net when he plays for the Nittany Lions in the future as well. But, yeah, overall, really big for Penn State to get Granville on campus now instead of 6 months from now.
Granville currently listed at 6'3", 220 pounds. So you bring up the weight factor. Yeah, he's not going to be able to play right away at that weight. So getting to 230, potentially, I mean, honestly, they want to get him to 240, maybe 250 pounds. Again, depending on what position he is. Chop Robinson played around, 255? I think Abdul Carter is now up to 260 in the current present. So if he's going to play at defensive end, he's going to need to add at least 25 pounds But maybe if he does stay at linebacker and be that off-ball backer, be that 235, 240 pounds, give or take. But yeah, this is essentially his early enrollment. It's just
Yeah.
happening 5, 6 months earlier. So he gets acclimated, and I don't know what a Max Granville type would need to show at the high school level anymore. What
Right.
is the point of him playing his senior season if he's all in on Penn State now? So there's no possibility of a flip. There's no recruiting. This is a win overall in so many categories. You mentioned that defensive line's going to take a hit, especially at pass rusher.
Yeah.
Linebacker could take a hit as well.
Yeah.
What's Kobe King's decision going to be in next year's going into next year's draft? Dom DeLuca, Tyler Elsdon. You could have all new faces
Absolutely.
at the linebacker room, and then Abdul Carter is going to be a hybrid of a defensive end one week. He could be a linebacker the next week. So he also falls in that category. There are a lot of front seven defenders that could be moving on. So you get Max Granville now to where he's not somebody completely brand new going into next season.
I 100% agree. And I think for Granville, obviously this was a choice that him and his family had to discuss over the last few weeks, I'm sure. But I think part of it is does he believe that, obviously academically he was able to do so, but from a football standpoint, did he believe it would be better for his development to get, into campus, onto campus earlier and start working with Deion Barnes as soon as, this upcoming month? Or was it going to be better for him to stay at home, work with his high school coaches? And obviously in Texas, there's plenty of high school coaches that could be, very good college coaches, whether that's positional coordinators or even some head coaches out there. But ultimately, Deion Barnes has shown very early in his career as a Penn State defensive line coach that he has the ability to develop defensive linemen, especially defensive ends, and working with him for that extra 6 months, just like working with the strength and conditioning staff for those extra 6 months, could be huge for Granville's development long term. And just, thinking big picture for Granville, I'm not sure how old Max is at this exact moment in time, but whatever he is, he's getting into campus basically. His first year of college football is going to be a whole year earlier than it would have been next year. If he's a kid who develops and is able to play on Sundays down the road, having that extra year of or less wear and tear or less years age than everybody else in his draft class eventually butchered all that. But if he is younger than the rest of his draft class, that could be huge for him as well down the road if you can develop into an NFL level guy. So I think this is just a win-win for everybody. You mentioned the recruiting aspect of it. Penn State doesn't have to worry about him flipping anywhere. They don't have to worry about Oklahoma, Texas A&M getting in his ear over the next few months. This is now done with. He's going to be on campus in time for fall practices next week, and he's going to be a Nittany Lion.
He was very close to committing to Oklahoma before Penn State made its final recruiting pitch, and now he is officially enrolled with the Nittany Lions. But is Penn State essentially robbing Peter to pay Paul? Are they taking from the class of 2025 to boost the class of 2024? No, that is not the case, and we'll tell you why coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to its peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you are into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. And with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you are burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car into that MVP and bring home huge victories. Keep your ride or die alive right now. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. That's ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Again, Max Granville is reclassifying here, moving from the class of 2025 to 2024. We talked about all the benefits here. It's a win-win in everybody's situation. The 2024 class gets even better. But is that essentially subtracting from 2025's group? And I say no. Dylan, yes, you are losing a commit from the class of 2025, but Dion Barnes and the defensive staff overall have done such an exceptional job. Max Granville, specifically for the class of 2025, Dylan, have essentially they have recruited these prospects that are positionless, that are hybrid. They can be a defensive end, they can be an off-ball linebacker. They are just disruptors on defense. It could have been, so you have Max Granville. It could have easily been Jaden Woods. It could have been LeVar Arrington II. It could have been Deshaun Burnett. It could have been Cortez Harris. It could have been any of those guys. It just happened to be Max Granville. All of these players, and I just rattled off 4 or 5 different names, right? Yeah. So that's why I say the class of 2025 is fine, because you already have so many edge defender, linebacker, hybrid types. It's not like Max Granville was the only one in the class of 2025. And again, don't forget about Alex Tatch, who is a true linebacker. But when you look at all of these edge defender, multi-position athletes here that are coming in that just can disrupt the line of scrimmage, they can be a free roaming linebacker. At the end of the day, Penn State already has a ton of them. And you moving Max Granville up just accelerates the clock of all of these players, but gives somebody a head start. So again, that the cupboard is not left barren when you do lose Abdul Carter, when you do lose Kobe King, when you do lose Denai Dennis Sutton. So now you have more options, and you at least bridge that gap a little bit, because it is only one player. I mean, that's a lot of pressure on Max Granville to develop in one cycle to be that bridge for the losses of all those impact players when they do eventually move on.
Yeah, I 100% agree. That's exactly a great way to put it. Yeah, it knocks down Penn State's 2025 recruiting class down a spot or two in rankings and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I think the initial team recruiting rankings anymore, while important, are not necessarily as important as they once were. When it was national champion after national championship. Champion had top 5 or top 10 classes in the years before, and especially in this ever evolving world of college athletics with NIL, the transfer portal, and now scholarship limits. And I 100% agree with you. I don't think it damages Penn State's 2025 recruiting class in any shape or form. It just, like you said, kind of speeds up the timeline for almost everybody now. But especially for Max Granville and what Penn State's going to do on that defensive line going forward. Because, after this year, they could be saying goodbye to both Abdul Carter and Denai Dennis Sutton. And while they have depth at the position, a couple of guys that we believe that could develop into strong pass rushers, there is still a lot of uncertainty about that position. And that Max Granville doesn't necessarily solve that uncertainty, but surely does give them another very high upside option to potentially look forward to being a part of that rotation in 2025 and beyond.
They wouldn't have asked Max Granville to reclassify if they didn't believe in his potential. That's what I mean. So yes, Max Granville and his family ultimately had to make the decision, is this going to be best for Granville himself? But Penn State obviously pushed for this. They're not doing this with just any other prospect in the class of 2025. And this is such an uncommon move. It is almost national headline news anytime a player reclassifies at any respective school. I can't remember the last time that Penn State actually did this, where they reclassified a player because whether it was by need or just the overall potential of what kind of player that person could be at the end of the day. I mean, they didn't even do this with Micah Parsons, for example.
Yeah, and it's one of those situations where everything has to, it has to be the right time for everybody, and everything has to be in place, and it's hard to get all of these ducks lined up in a row. It's a perfect storm for Penn State here with Max Granville, and they're able to get this done and get him on campus. And now it is a golden opportunity for Max Granville, and we'll see if he can take the proverbial bull by the horns here and do something with it.
No, you're absolutely right that everything in terms of, again, he's from the state of Texas. There's a lot involved here. He's not an hour or 2 hours driving distance away from Penn State. So there's his personal decision, how that affects his family, how that affects his schoolwork. Does he have the capability to be like a lot of prospects need that senior season of high school? There's a very select few. Obviously, you would say the 5 stars there, right? The 32 some 5 stars that in a respective class that, yes, could enroll early. Maybe they see the field right away. Maybe they don't. But there's still a very select small percentage of players that can actually do this. So this checklist is very long, and Max Granville checks each and every single one of the boxes. I think the class of 2025 is fine. You're not losing a commit. You're not trading a commit. It's just happening sooner. And again, you have Alex Tatch. You have LeVar Arrington II. You have Jaden Woods. You have Deshaun Burnett. You have all these defenders that fall in the same category as Max Granville. If this was the only 1 or 2 linebacker edge defender commits, then I'd say, yeah, you really got to hit the ground running, because who's his replacement going to be? But that's not the case. There's other position groups in the class of 2025. Offensive line, for example, right, that I still think Penn State could bolster, because defensive back is fine. Your front 7 is fine. And I think just outside of wide receiver and offensive line, if you can bolster those groups, then that's how you complete the class of 2025. You don't need to do anything defensively, honestly. Defense is taken care of for this year, for this year's cycle.
Agreed. 100% agree with you.
So Dylan, is there anything that they will do for the class of 2025 moving forward? Lasch Bash is typically focused on 26 or the adjacent class, and some 2027 and 28 as well, which we will discuss in the final segment.
Yep.
We know that there has been a future cast by John Garcia of Rivals to have Kobe Howard eventually commit to Penn State. His commitment date is set for August 24th. So that's a wide receiver that everyone's discussed at length when it comes to Penn State recruiting. But other than that, I feel like, again, I will reiterate, this is it for the class of 2025. It's cool to have this kind of breaking news for the conversations and the discussions and the analysis, but I don't think that Penn State's going to have this flux of commitments through the end of the summer, into the fall, right before signing day. Who, outside of Kobe Howard, is there anybody else realistically that they could land a commitment from?
Yeah, the only other guy right now outside of Kobe Howard that we're really paying attention to here at Head Valley Insider is Maryland defensive tackle Yvonne Kamaju, who we futurecasted at Penn State way back in, I believe, May. For a while, it was very quiet in his recruitment, but over the last few weeks, it has picked up a little bit more, and it does seem like a decision could come sooner than later. And Penn State seems to be in a great spot to eventually land a commitment from Kamaju, who we now have at Rivals as a 4-star prospect and one of the top defensive ends on the East Coast. Number 8 in the state, number 8 player overall in the state of Maryland, number 20 weak side defensive end in the country, 100% future cast right now to Penn State. This would be I think a really nice pickup for Penn State. And I know I said we have him ranked as a defensive end. That is correct, but Penn State does, I believe, view him long-term as a defensive tackle. Right now at 6'3", 230. So he'd have quite a bit of weight to put on. But other schools that are involved here, Northwestern, Indiana, Duke, Rutgers, and Virginia Tech. This was recruitment that really, I think, is coming down to Penn State and Virginia Tech, two obviously high academic programs, two historically good football programs as well. And right now, I believe the Nittany Lions have the edge over the Hokies heading into a decision here for Kamaju. But outside of him and Howard, it is mostly quiet right now. There are a couple wide receivers out there that I think are worth, keeping an eye on long term. But right now, nobody else is close to a commitment, I think. And if these are and I wouldn't be surprised if these are the last two guys for Penn State this cycle. I won't rule out any commitments down the road. But after Howard and Kamaju make their decisions, then Kamaju hasn't set a date, but I'm sure that's going to be in the next few weeks too. After those two decisions, I think it's going to be quiet for a while and perhaps the rest of the cycle.
For what it's worth, I do want to mention Zahir Mathis just because teammate Jabri Wallace-Coleman, who's talked to you guys, has said that he's constantly trying to recruit and flip him from Ohio State to Penn State. Right. So there is that to watch. Penn State's on the outside looking in there. And I think Malachi Goodman as well, even though Georgia, Alabama, Auburn are all involved in that recruitment, Penn State is still in the mix. The odds aren't exactly in their favor.
And honestly, I completely blanked on Malachi Goodman just because his recruitment is one that we really haven't heard anything about since the end of June. He's kept things under wraps. I think Penn State is in a solid spot for Malachi Goodman, but when you're going up against the likes of Alabama, USC, and Auburn, it's going to be a tough one to win. If NIL becomes a major discussion point in this recruitment, it doesn't favor the Nittany Lions. I think we can all agree on that. But it's going to be an interesting recruitment to really watch here over the next few months or weeks, whenever he decides to make a decision. Our one national analyst, Ryan O'Blennis, did recently do an article where he did predict right now Penn State to land Malachi Goodman. But we'll ultimately have to wait and see. But I completely blanked on Goodman because, like I said, it's just been very quiet on that end since the end of official visits. Zahir Mathis is another one that you recently that you brought up, which is a good one to mention. Penn State, did a great job of that official visit last month. They're staying in contact with Mathis. We'll see what Ohio State decides to do in terms of, are they going to push hard to keep Mathis?
Right.
Where they stand on Mathis currently. They did not host Mathis for an official visit in June. They plan on doing so this fall. So there's still plenty to be worked out in that recruitment as well. And then the one wide receiver, I guess, worth mentioning long-term potentially is Utah prospect Jerome Miles, who has a really strong offer sheet, was previously at one point, I think, favored to land with Ole Miss, perhaps.
He was committed at one point, briefly.
Committed very briefly at Ole Miss. And then Utah is the favorite right now, it looks like. But
they should be.
As you would expect, being a Utah player. He's from one of the better programs in Utah, Corner Canyon. So he's somebody to just keep an eye out. Penn State's been in contact there for a while, but his recruitment is also kind of blown up this month. On top of that, Penn State offer USC, Ohio State, LSU, Miami, Nebraska, Texas A&M, Auburn, all since he decommitted from Ole Miss in June. So this one looks like it may started 4 miles, but just one to monitor over the next few months.
And then there's the Lasch Bash this weekend. So recruiting does not stop. And with it officially being underway, I'm more interested in the prospects that are not attending versus the ones that are officially there. We'll discuss that more coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much that I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs come to an end, we get fewer games and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all of its customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everybody each and every day, all summer long. So all you got to do is head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. And if you take a look at the lines for Major League Baseball, the Philadelphia Phillies are currently favorites against the Guardians for tonight's game with a money line of -165 and a total set at 8. And the Pirates are currently underdogs, +150 on the money line against the Arizona Diamondbacks on the road with a total set at 8.5. If you like those lines, you can bet them now over at FanDuel.com. Once again, that's FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. The Lasch Bash is this weekend, and plenty of class of 2026 prospects will be there. If you want to see the full list, I encourage you to go to HappyValleyInsider.com to check it out. There's names that are absent from the list that, Dylan, I'm honestly just more intrigued by. I don't know about concerned because the class of 2026 is still way out there, even though Penn State is off to a great start with Troy Hune and Messiah Mickens, your quarterback, running back dynamic duo, to lead the way here. And they will both be on campus visiting for the Lasch Bash, so they can help with the recruiting. But I look at, Emmanuel Iannacho, who's one of the best, who will probably be the best offensive line prospect in the entire, like the consensus rankings for the class of 2026 at the end of the day out of the DC area. He is not listed. Tyler Merrill is not listed. He's an interior offensive lineman from Cumberland Valley who's actually visiting Notre Dame this weekend. There's Joey O'Brien, who's a top prospect in the state of Pennsylvania. Just the names that are absent surprise me more. I mean, good for Penn State to have Kevin Brown, for example, on campus for the Lasch Bash, but just some of those names that Penn State obviously has all the way up on their big board are either absent or visiting somewhere else for a different barbecue.
Yeah, I mean, definitely a good visitors list for Penn State already. Some of their top targets are on campus, guys like Kevin Brown, Daniel Jennings, Tariq Boney, Maxwell Hiller from the 2027 cycle. And there's obviously a bunch of 2026 guys that are pretty high on their board. But yeah, there are a handful of high-end targets that are not on campus this weekend. You mentioned some of those. Emmanuel Iannacho is not going to be. That one, Penn State would have loved, I think, obviously, to get him on campus to continue with his recruitment. As of right now, I'm not sure he's actually visiting anywhere. He seems. Let's see here. He's actually going to be in Oregon this weekend, visiting the Ducks, according to our national guy. Who else did you mention? Tyler Merrill. Yeah, Merrill. Up there with Kevin Brown when it comes to top overall prospects, and Emmanuel Iannacho. Merrill, I think, more of a guard at the next level, not as high on the board as those other two, but still, elite offensive lineman from in-state. These are the guys you'd love to have, even if you're not in love with them necessarily as a prospect or 100% sold on this or that as a prospect, which I'm not saying they're not about Merrill. I think Merrill is absolutely a top 100, 125 kid in the country, elite prospect. But even with these type of prospects, I think in state that you may not necessarily be 100% comfortable with as a player, there may be some question marks. You have to, in my opinion, take these level of kids because at the end of the day, their ceilings are some of the highest on the board, some of the highest in the country. Merrill is somebody that, he has some flaws. I don't think he's as strong of a prospect as Emmanuel Iannacho or Kevin Brown, but still a very good prospect. He's going to be at Michigan and Notre Dame, like you said, but he's been to Penn State almost
plenty of times,
a dozen times already. So not really a big one there. Jerome Miles, they just offered. He's at Michigan this weekend, like we said in the previous segment.
Yeah, in the class of 2025. So even though the Lasch Bash is primarily about 26, 27, really branching out to the future, I think about, okay, yes, Kobe Howard's going to be here for the Lasch Bash, and Penn State, again, is anticipating an eventual commitment from him. But then there's Jerome Miles, who they just offered, going to be at Michigan, as you mentioned, and then Romero Eisen. Is he going to be there? Is he not going to be there? But that's an important one. That's a USC commitment currently, but he's out of the state of Maryland. Penn State tried pushing for him early on before he committed to the Trojans. If he's not on campus, you're missing an opportunity to flip him. Yeah,
absolutely. It is, I don't know if I'd characterize as a missed opportunity in the grand scheme of things, but yeah, I mean, obviously anytime you can get that type of player on campus and have that opportunity to potentially flip them, you'd love to take it. Unfortunately for Penn State, that's not what they have at their disposal this weekend. But some of those just have to ultimately live with. You also mentioned Joey O'Brien, 2026 safety out of PA. Actually, I think you mentioned where he was visiting. I'm blanking on it right now. But I know Notre Dame is a heavy favorite there early in his recruitment. So that one, Penn State's going to have room to make up going forward. But yeah, obviously missing a couple of top targets on this list. It's unfortunate for Penn State, but I still think at the end of the day, this is a strong offer sheet. I think everybody offer sheet visitors list. I think everybody on this visitors list, or most everybody, will be playing FBS level football, potentially Power 5 4 football even. It's going to take a little bit to get used to. So, yeah, obviously it doesn't have some of those guys, but overall still a really good visitors list from top to bottom, in my opinion. And I wouldn't be surprised if, we look at this time next year and there's a handful of guys from this visitors list that end up committed to Penn State, and that's not already included Troy Hunt and Messiah Mickens, who are already committed to the Nittany Lions and will be on campus.
I'm not trying to be critical because I agree with you. This list is very extensive. There's just the more the merrier, and you want your biggest potential targets to be there if you can get them. Like I said, these are the names that are absent that are important to point out, because I've said that Penn State for 2026, because they're off to such a great start, that it could be a top 5 class if everything goes well. You have a top 10 quarterback and a top 10 running back already verbally committed there. The dominoes are just going to fall and everything's going to take care of itself. But you still need everything to go right for the potential of a top 5 class. And this instance right here, it's a weekend barbecue in the middle of July. There's still a year and a half's time before that official signing day is here. So it's not concerning, but I still think it's an important precedent moving forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely it is. And it's also one of those things, you look at a kid like Emmanuel Iheanacho, has offers from everywhere in the country, everywhere. And he's visiting Oregon this weekend, out of not that, makes 100% sense, a 5-star prospect visiting Oregon, but he could have visited anywhere this weekend, and he's choosing to visit Oregon. So with some visits, I'm not saying with Emmanuel Iheanacho, but as we've learned with some visits, there are sometimes monetary factors involved here as well. It's one of those things where all these staffs are going after, a limited group of prospects, and at the end of the day, only one staff is going to be able, or one or two staffs are going to be able to host a kid over the course of a weekend. Penn State's hosting kids both, I believe, Friday and Saturday, and has a camp Sunday as well. But, some kids like Iheanacho who are going to Oregon, you can't get in multiple visits that way. But overall, I still think this is, like you said, definitely you want to set the precedent of, again, as many are top targets on campus for these type of events. But also, it's just a numbers game at the end of the day when it comes to these barbecues at the end of July. And, furthermore, this is the last July barbecue that in college football for the foreseeable future as well, or July barbecue weekend, starting with the 2025 cycle. The entire month of July, I believe, is going to be a dead period. So it'll be interesting to see when these barbecues get pushed up. Will it be, the final recruiting weeks of June, or I think perhaps the Memorial Day weekend. Memorial Day weekend could make sense as a future barbecue weekend in college football as well. But it's going to be interesting to see how all this works out going forward.
He is Dylan Callaghan-Croley, Penn State Rivals Insider, Penn State Rivals Editor. HappyValleyInsider.com is the place to check out. All of Dylan's socials and platforms will be linked in the description. Dylan, thanks again so much for the time as always, and the insider information surrounding Penn State recruiting. And as always, thanks so much for checking out this episode of Locked On Nittany Lions. Be a part of the discussion down in the comments section, what you think about Max Granville reclassifying from 2025 to 2024, and what you think his impact will be during his Penn State football career. If you enjoyed this conversation, please leave a like on it, share it with friends and family. And if you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams. And don't forget, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus the national shows covering each and every league. You can find Locked On Sports Today now available on YouTube and the free Fire TV channels app.